A millionaire, upon seeing a homeless young woman in need of help to feed her child, gave her $300 to buy something. The next day, while visiting the grave of his late wife, who had passed away 23 years ago, he encountered something unexpected. The same woman was there, kneeling in front of the tombstone. The rain-slicked streets of Boston reflected the glow of streetlights like a shimmering urban constellation. Jonah Wilson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, gazing out at the city he once conquered with ruthless ambition. Now, at 57, he felt more like a ghost haunting the halls of his own life than the titan of industry he had become. His reflection stared back at him, salt and pepper hair meticulously styled, designer suit impeccably tailored. To the outside world, he was the very picture of success. But Jonah knew the truth that lay behind his steely blue eyes, a void so vast and deep it threatened to consume him entirely. "Mr. Wilson?" The soft voice of his assistant, Sarah, broke through his reverie. "Your 9 o'clock is here." Jonah didn't turn. "Cancel it," he said, his voice low and gravelly from disuse. "Cancel everything for today." Sarah hesitated, her reflection in the window showing her furrowed brow. "But sir, the board meeting—" "I said cancel it," Jonah snapped, finally turning to face her. The sharpness in his tone made Sarah flinch, and a flicker of remorse crossed Jonah's features. He softened his voice. "Please, Sarah, I'm not feeling up to it today." Sarah nodded, concern evident in her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Wilson. Is there anything else you need?" Jonah shook his head, already turning back to the window. "No, thank you. You can take the day off." As Sarah's footsteps faded, Jonah's gaze drifted to the framed photograph on his desk. Kayla's smile beamed back at him, frozen in time. 23 years had passed since he last saw that smile in person, yet the pain of her loss felt as fresh as the day she died. He remembered the day that photo was taken, a rare moment of joy during Kayla's grueling battle with cancer. They had gone to the beach, defying doctors' orders. Kayla had insisted, saying she needed to feel the sun on her face one last time. Jonah had protested, but in the end, he could deny her nothing. "You worry too much, my love," Kayla had said, her laugh carried away by the salty breeze. "Some things are worth the risk." Now, as Jonah traced the outline of her face in the photograph, he wondered if he had ever truly understood what she meant. Since her passing, he had built walls around his heart, focusing solely on expanding his empire. Risk in any form was something to be calculated, minimized, and ultimately avoided. The intercom on his desk buzzed, startling him. "What is it?" he answered, irritation coloring his tone. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Wilson." His security chief's voice crackled through the speaker. "But there's a situation in the lobby you should be aware of." Jonah sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "What kind of situation, Frank?" "There's a young woman here, sir. Says her name is Annabelle Murray. She's quite insistent on speaking with you. Claims it's about your late wife." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jonah gripped the edge of his desk, steadying himself. "What did you say?" "A Ms. Annabelle Murray, sir. She—" "Send her up," Jonah interrupted, his heart pounding in his chest. "Now!" The minutes ticked by like hours as Jonah paced his office. His mind raced with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Who was this woman? What could she possibly know about Kayla? A soft knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice steadier than he felt. The door opened, revealing a young woman in her early 20s. She was slight, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for her youthful face. In her arms she cradled a sleeping infant. "Mr. Wilson?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm Annabelle Murray. Thank you for seeing me." Jonah nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. He remained standing, his posture rigid. "You said you had information about my wife." Annabelle sat, adjusting the baby in her arms. "Yes, I'm not sure how to say this, Mr. Wilson. It's about Kayla. She was my mother." The world seemed to stop. Jonah stared at Annabelle, uncomprehending. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "Kayla and I never had children." Tears welled up in Annabelle's eyes. "Not with you, no. But before she met you, when she was very young." Jonah felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. He sank into his chair, his mind reeling. "Explain," he managed to say. Annabelle took a deep breath. "Kayla was 17 when she had me. She gave me up for adoption. I only found out recently when I started looking into my birth parents." As Annabelle spoke, Jonah's world shifted and realigned. Memories flooded back, moments when Kayla had seemed distant, haunted by something she couldn't or wouldn't share. The way she would sometimes look at children with a mixture of longing and guilt. He had always attributed it to their inability to have children of their own. But now, "Why are you here?" Jonah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" Annabelle's eyes widened. "I don't want anything, Mr. Wilson. I needed to know where I came from. And I thought you deserved to know the truth about Kayla." The baby in Annabelle's arms began to stir, letting out a soft whimper. Annabelle rocked him gently, murmuring soothing words. Jonah watched the interaction, a strange ache forming in his chest. "The child, is he—" "My son," Annabelle confirmed. "His name is Gordon. Gordon, Kayla's grandson." The thought hit Jonah like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, walking back to the window. The city sprawled before him, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in his office. "Mr. Wilson?" Annabelle's voice was hesitant. "I'm sorry if I've upset you. I can go if you'd like." Jonah turned, really looking at Annabelle for the first time. He saw Kayla in the curve of her cheek, the shape of her eyes. How had he missed it before? "No," he said, surprising himself. "No, please stay. I think we have a lot to talk about." As Annabelle began to share her story, Jonah felt something stir within him, a feeling he had long thought dead. It was small, fragile, but undeniably present. Hope. For the first time in 23 years, Jonah Wilson felt the walls around his heart begin to crumble. And as he listened to Annabelle, watched Gordon sleep peacefully in her arms, he realized that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The rain outside had stopped, and a weak ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the office. It felt, Jonah thought, like a sign. Perhaps Kayla had been right all those years ago. Some things were indeed worth the risk. The days following Annabelle's unexpected arrival blurred together for Jonah. He found himself in a state of constant emotional flux, oscillating between disbelief, anger, and a tentative hope he dared not fully embrace. The world he had carefully constructed over the past 2 decades, a world of predictability, control, and emotional detachment, was crumbling around him. 1 week after their initial meeting, Jonah sat across from Annabelle in a quiet cafe near his office. Gordon slept peacefully in a stroller beside them. The silence between them was heavy with unasked questions and unspoken fears. "I still can't believe she never told me," Jonah said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, tinged with a mixture of hurt and wonder. Annabelle cupped her coffee mug, her slender fingers tracing its rim. "From what I've learned, it wasn't an easy decision for her. She was so young, and the circumstances—" "What circumstances?" Jonah interrupted, leaning forward. "Who was your father?" Annabelle's eyes clouded. "His name was Daniel. That's all I know. Apparently he disappeared as soon as Kayla told him she was pregnant." Jonah's jaw clenched. The thought of Kayla, young and vulnerable, abandoned by someone who should have stood by her, made his blood boil. It was a stark contrast to the strong, confident woman he had known and loved. "Mr. Wilson," Annabelle began hesitantly. "Jonah," he corrected her. "Please, call me Jonah." She nodded, a small smile flickering across her face. "Jonah, I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt your life or make any claims. I needed to know where I came from. And I thought you deserved to know the truth about Kayla." Jonah studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit, but all he saw was sincerity and a vulnerability that tugged at his long, dormant heartstrings. "I believe you," he said finally, "but I need time to process all of this. It's a lot to take in." Annabelle nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Of course, I understand. Thank you for even agreeing to meet with me." As they parted ways, Jonah watched Annabelle disappear into the bustling Boston crowd, pushing Gordon's stroller. He felt a strange urge to follow them, to protect them. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one that both exhilarated and terrified him. Back at his office, Jonah found himself unable to focus on work. His mind kept drifting back to Kayla, to the secret she had carried for so long. He picked up the phone, his fingers hovering over the keypad before dialing a familiar number. "Doctor." "Elaine Foster's office," a cheerful voice answered. "This is Jonah Wilson. I need to speak with Elaine." There was a pause, then, "One moment, Mr. Wilson." Elaine's voice came on the line, warm and familiar. "Jonah, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? Jonah hesitated. Elaine had been Kayla's oncologist, and over the years of Kayla's treatment, she had become more than just a doctor to them. She was the closest thing to a friend that Jonah had allowed himself since Kayla's passing. I need to talk to you, Jonah said. It's about Kayla, can you meet me? An hour later, Jonah sat in Elaine's office, recounting his encounter with Annabelle. Elaine listened intently, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. I had no idea, Elaine said when Jonah finished. Kayla never mentioned anything about a child. But you knew her better than anyone towards the end, Jonah pressed. Was there ever any hint, any sign that she was keeping something like this from me? Elaine leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed in thought. Jonah, you have to understand. Doctor-patient confidentiality. Damn it, Elaine, Jonah exploded, slamming his fist on the armrest of his chair. This isn't about doctor-patient anything. This is about my wife, about our life together. Was it all a lie? Elaine's eyes softened with compassion. No, Jonah. Your life with Kayla wasn't a lie. The love you shared was real. But we all have parts of ourselves, parts of our past that we keep hidden, even from those closest to us. Jonah slumped in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 57 years. I thought I knew her. I thought we shared everything. Perhaps, Elaine said gently, this is Kayla's way of sharing this part of herself with you now, through Annabelle. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Jonah stood abruptly, pacing the small office. What am I supposed to do, Elaine? Welcome this stranger into my life with open arms? Pretend that the last 23 years haven't happened? Elaine stood, placing a comforting hand on Jonah's arm. No one expects you to have all the answers right now, Jonah. This is a shock and it's going to take time to process. But ask yourself this, what would Kayla want you to do? The question hit Jonah like a physical blow. What would Kayla want? He could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm. Love, Jonah, always choose love. As Jonah left Elaine's office, his mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He walked aimlessly through the city streets, barely noticing the curious glances from passers-by who recognized the famous reclusive billionaire. His wanderings brought him to the public garden, where he and Kayla had spent countless hours during their courtship. He found himself on a bench near the swan boats, watching families and couples enjoying the late afternoon sun. A young family caught his eye, a mother and father, probably in their early 30s with a toddler between them. The child's laughter rang out across the park as his parents swung him gently by the arms. Jonah felt a pang of longing so intense it took his breath away. Is this what we missed out on, Kayla? He thought. Is this what you gave up? His reverie was interrupted by the ringing of his cell phone. It was Sarah, his assistant. Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's an urgent matter that requires your attention. The merger with Tech Innovations. There's been a complication. Jonah sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. What kind of complication, Sarah? Their CEO, Mr. Reeves, is threatening to pull out of the deal. He says he has concerns about our company's direction. For a moment, Jonah was tempted to tell Sarah to handle it, to leave him alone with his thoughts. But years of habit kicked in, and he found himself slipping back into the role of the ruthless businessman. Tell Reeves I'll meet with him first thing tomorrow morning. And Sarah, get me everything we have on him. Personal history, financial records, everything. If he wants to play hardball, we'll be ready. As he hung up, Jonah felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This at least was familiar territory. In the boardroom, he knew who he was. He knew how to win. But as he made his way back to his office, Annabelle's face kept intruding on his thoughts. What would she think of this side of him? The cold, calculating businessman who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. More importantly, what would Kayla think? The next morning, Jonah arrived at his office earlier than usual. He had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of Kayla, Annabelle, and the impending meeting with Reeves. As he reviewed the files Sarah had prepared on Tech Innovations CEO, there was a knock at his door. He looked up to see Frank, his head of security, looking uncomfortable. "What is it, Frank?" Jonah asked, noting the man's unease. "Sir, there's been an incident with Ms. Murray." Jonah was on his feet in an instant. "What kind of incident? Is she all right?" Frank shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "She's fine, sir, but she tried to gain access to the building last night, said she needed to speak with you urgently. When security refused her entry, she became agitated. They had to escort her off the premises." Jonah felt a surge of anger, at Frank at the security team, at himself for not being available when Annabelle needed him. "And you're just telling me this now? I'm sorry, sir. Given the sensitive nature of the situation, I thought it best to inform you in person." Jonah waved him off, already reaching for his phone. "Find out where she is, Frank. Now." As Frank left to carry out his orders, Jonah dialed Annabelle's number. It went straight to voicemail. He left a message trying to keep the worry out of his voice. "Annabelle, it's Jonah. I just heard about what happened last night. I'm sorry you couldn't reach me. Please call me back as soon as you get this. I want to make sure you and Gordon are okay." He hung up, feeling a sense of helplessness that was entirely foreign to him. In his world, problems were solved with money, influence, or sheer force of will. But this tangled web of emotions and family secrets was beyond his expertise. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sarah poked her head in. "Mr. Wilson, Mr. Reeves is here for your meeting." Jonah nodded, straightening his tie. "Send him in." As he prepared to face Reeves, Jonah felt the familiar mask of the hard-nosed businessman slip into place. But for the first time in years, it felt uncomfortable, like a suit that no longer fit quite right. The meeting with Reeves was tense from the start. The younger CEO was clearly prepared for a fight, his body language defensive and his tone confrontational. "Let's cut to the chase, Wilson," Reeves said, leaning forward in his chair. "Your company's been coasting on past successes for years. Where's the innovation? Where's the vision?" Jonah felt a flicker of anger, but he kept his voice calm. "Our track record speaks for itself, Mr. Reeves. We've consistently outperformed market expectations." "Market expectations," Reeves scoffed. "Is that what you're aiming for now? To meet expectations? What happened to the Jonah Wilson who revolutionized the industry? The one who took risks?" The words hit Jonah like a physical blow. When had he become so safe, so predictable? He thought of Kayla, of her words on the beach all those years ago. "Some things are worth the risk." "You're right," Jonah said quietly, surprising both Reeves and himself. Reeves blinked, thrown off balance. What?" "You're right," Jonah repeated, stronger this time. "We've been playing it safe. But that changes now." For the next hour, Jonah laid out a vision for the merged company that was bold, innovative, and more than a little risky. By the time Reeves left, the merger was back on track and there was a newfound respect in the younger man's eyes. As the door closed behind Reeves, Jonah slumped in his chair, emotionally drained. He had just committed his company to a course that would have been unthinkable a week ago. What had changed? The answer came to him with startling clarity. Annabelle. The mere existence of this young woman and her child had shaken him out of the comfortable routine he had built for himself. She represented everything he had been avoiding for years: uncertainty, emotional vulnerability, the possibility of both great joy and great pain. His phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Ms. Murray located. Currently at Boston Children's Hospital with infant son." Jonah's heart clenched with fear. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day," he told a startled Sarah as he strode past her desk. As his driver navigated through Boston traffic, Jonah's mind raced with possibilities. Was Gordon sick? Had something happened to Annabelle? The thought of either of them in pain caused him physical discomfort, a feeling he hadn't experienced since Kayla's illness. At the hospital, Jonah used every ounce of his considerable influence to get information. He found Annabelle in a waiting room, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Annabelle," he said softly, approaching her. "What happened? Is Gordon all right?" She looked up at him, surprise and relief warring on her face. "Jonah, how did you—" "Never mind, it's Gordon. He has a high fever, and the doctors, they're running tests." Without thinking, Jonah sat beside her and took her hand. "Tell me everything." As Annabelle recounted the events of the night, Gordon's sudden fever, her panic, the rushed trip to the emergency room, Jonah felt a protective instinct surge within him. This was his family, he realized with a jolt. Unconventional, unexpected, but undeniably his. "I'm sorry about last night," Annabelle said, her voice small. "I shouldn't have come to your office like that. I was just scared." "No, I'm sorry," Jonah said firmly. "I should have been there for you. But I'm here now, and we're going to get through this together." As they waited for news about Gordon, Jonah made calls, ensuring that the best pediatric specialists were consulted. He paced the waiting room, bargained with nurses for updates, and held Annabelle's hand through her tears. Hours later, a doctor finally approached them with news. "Ms. Murray, your son is going to be fine. It was a severe case of flu, but we've got his fever under control now. He'll need to stay overnight for observation, but you can see him now." The relief that washed over Jonah was overwhelming. He watched as Annabelle rushed to Gordon's room, then followed more slowly, feeling like an intruder in this intimate family moment. But when he reached the doorway, the sight before him took his breath away. Annabelle was cradling Gordon, murmuring soothing words. And there, in the child's features, Jonah saw unmistakable echoes of Kayla. In that moment, standing on the threshold of Gordon's hospital room, Jonah Wilson faced a choice. He could retreat to the safety of his carefully constructed world of business deals and emotional detachment. Or he could step forward into the messy, unpredictable, beautiful world of family. Taking a deep breath, Jonah stepped into the room. The weeks following Gordon's hospitalization saw a gradual shift in Jonah's life. He found himself increasingly drawn into Annabelle and Gordon's world, his carefully maintained schedule giving way to impromptu visits and late-night phone calls. The corporate titan, who once measured his days in 15-minute increments, now found himself losing track of time as he watched Gordon attempt his first steps or listened to Annabelle's stories of her childhood. It was on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 month after Gordon's hospital scare, that Jonah's world tilted on its axis once again. He stood before Kayla's grave, a bouquet of her favorite lilies in his hand. This weekly pilgrimage had been his ritual for 23 years, a time for reflection, and if he was honest with himself, a way to hold on to his grief like a shield against the world. But today was different. As he approached the familiar headstone, he saw a figure kneeling before it. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized Annabelle's slender form. She hadn't noticed his approach, her attention focused on something in her hands. As Jonah drew closer, he realized it was a letter. Annabelle's voice, soft and trembling, carried on the cool morning air. "And I hope you can forgive me, Mom. I wish I had known you, had the chance to tell you that I understand, that I don't blame you. I just hope that somehow, wherever you are, you know that I found my way back to you." Jonah's footsteps faltered, and a twig snapped beneath his shoe. Annabelle startled, turning to face him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Jonah!" she gasped, hastily folding the letter. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect. I can go if you want privacy." Jonah shook his head, finding his voice. "No, please. Stay." He moved closer, placing the lilies beside the other flowers at the base of the headstone. Were you reading to her?" Annabelle nodded, her fingers tracing the edges of the folded paper. "It's a letter I wrote. I've been trying to find the courage to come here for weeks, to tell her that I forgive her, that I understand." The weight of the moment pressed down on Jonah. Here, in this place that had been his private sanctuary of grief, the past and present collided with staggering force. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the letter. Annabelle hesitated for a moment before holding it out to him. It's not very well written. I'm not sure what I was trying to say, really." Jonah unfolded the paper with trembling hands, Annabelle's neat handwriting blurring slightly as he began to read. "Dear Mom, I'm not sure how to start this letter. How do you talk to someone you've never met, but who has shaped your entire life? I've imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that I'm here, the words seem inadequate. I want you to know that I don't blame you for giving me up. I used to when I was younger and didn't understand. But now as a mother myself, I think I get it. You were so young, facing an impossible choice. You wanted to give me my best chance, even if it meant breaking your own heart. I had a good life, Mum. The family that adopted me, they loved me. They gave me everything they could, but there was always a part of me that felt incomplete, like a puzzle with a missing piece. Finding out about you, about my history, it's like finally finding that piece. And Jonah, I wish you could see him with Gordon. It's like watching him come alive. I think in a way we're healing each other. I hope you can forgive me for disrupting the life you built. I never meant to cause pain or stir up old wounds. I just needed to know where I came from to understand the woman who gave me life. I love you, Mom. I hope you knew love in your life, and I hope that somehow you know that I found my way back to you. Your daughter Annabelle." Jonah lowered the letter, his vision blurred with unshed tears. He looked at Annabelle, seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the determined set of her chin, all echoes of Kayla. She would have loved you. he said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Annabelle, she would have been so proud of the woman you've become. Annabelle's composure crumbled, and she began to sob. Without hesitation, Jonah pulled her into his arms, his own tears falling freely now. They stood like that for a long time, united in their grief and love for the woman who had connected them across time and circumstance. As Annabelle's sobs subsided, Jonah gently pulled away, keeping his hands on her shoulders. "There's something I need to show you," he said. "Something I think Kayla would want you to have." An hour later, they sat in Jonah's study, a box of Kayla's personal effects between them. Jonah had kept these items locked away for years, too painful to look at, but too precious to discard. With reverent care, he lifted out a small, leather-bound journal. "Kayla kept this during her illness," he explained, his voice soft. I could never bring myself to read it, but I think it might hold answers for both of us." Annabelle took the journal with trembling hands. "Are you sure this seems so personal?" Jonah nodded. "I'm sure Kayla wouldn't want secrets between us anymore." Together they began to read. The journal entries started shortly after Kayla's diagnosis, a mix of medical notes and personal reflections. But as they delved deeper, they found entries that made their hearts race. April 15th, 2000. "I saw a young mother with her daughter in the park today. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. They were laughing, chasing each other around the swings. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Jonah noticed my distress, but I couldn't tell him why. How do I explain that every little girl I see reminds me of the baby I gave up all those years ago, the daughter who would be a woman now with a life and dreams of her own? I wonder about her constantly. Does she know she's adopted? Is she happy? Does she ever think about me? I want to tell Jonah. He deserves to know. But I'm afraid that he'll look at me differently, that he'll be angry I kept this from him for so long. And selfishly, I'm afraid that telling him will make it all real in a way I'm not sure I can handle. I pray that someday, somehow, she'll understand why I did what I did, that she'll know it was the hardest decision I ever made, but that I did it out of love." Jonah's hands shook as he turned the page. The next entry was dated several months later, September 3rd, 2000. "I did something today that I'm not sure was right. I wrote a letter to my daughter, to Annabelle. I poured out everything I've wanted to say to her for the past 20 years. My reasons, my regrets, my love for her. I arranged for the letter to be delivered to her on her 21st birthday through the adoption agency. I know it's selfish, dropping this bombshell into her life. But the thought of leaving this world without her knowing the truth, without her knowing how much I've loved her every day of her life, I couldn't bear it. Jonah, my dear Jonah, I hope you can forgive me for keeping this from you. I hope you can understand that it wasn't about trust but about my own cowardice. And I hope if Annabelle ever finds her way to you, that you'll open your heart to her. She's a part of me, Jonah. The best part." Annabelle's gasp broke the heavy silence. "The letter, I never received it. I turned 21 3 years ago, but I never—" Jonah's mind raced. "The adoption agency. Do you remember which one it was?" "New Beginnings Adoption Services," Annabelle replied. "But they closed down about 5 years ago. All their records were supposed to be transferred to the state, but there was some kind of issue. A lot of files were lost or misplaced." Jonah felt a surge of determination. "We'll find it," he promised. "Whatever it takes, we'll track down that letter." As the reality of what they'd discovered settled over them, new questions and challenges arose. Annabelle's voice was hesitant when she spoke again. "Jonah, I don't know what this means. For us, I mean. I came here looking for answers about my past, but now—" Jonah took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Now you're family, Annabelle. You and Gordon both. I know it's not conventional, and God knows I'm probably the last person who should be trying to be any kind of father figure. But if you're willing, I'd like us to try to be a family, the kind of family Kayla would have wanted for all of us." Tears spilled down Annabelle's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." The moment was interrupted by Jonah's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen, frowning. "It's the office. I should take this." Annabelle nodded, wiping her eyes. "Of course, I should get back to Gordon anyway. His nanny probably thinks I've abandoned him." As Jonah took the call, stepping into the hallway, Annabelle gathered her things. She paused at the door, looking back at the box of Kayla's belongings, at the journal lying open on the desk. For the first time in her life, She felt a true connection to the woman who had given her life. Jonah returned, his expression troubled. "I'm sorry, but there's an emergency at the office. The SEC is launching an investigation into one of our subsidiaries. I need to go in." Annabelle nodded, understanding but disappointed. "Of course, we can continue this another time." As they walked to the front door, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. The emotional intimacy of the past few hours felt suddenly fragile in the face of real-world demands. "Annabelle," Jonah said, as she stepped onto the porch, "what we discovered today, what we talked about, it doesn't change just because I have to go to the office. We're family now, that's not going to change." Annabelle smiled, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "I know, it's a lot to process. For both of us, I think." Jonah nodded, understanding the unspoken fear. "How about dinner tomorrow night? You, me, and Gordon. We can talk more, start figuring out what this all means." "I'd like that," Annabelle replied, her smile more genuine now. As Jonah watched her walk away, he felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. Joy, fear, hope, uncertainty, all swirling together in a potent cocktail. He thought of Kayla, of the secret she had carried for so long. He thought of Annabelle, the daughter he never knew he had, and he thought of Gordon, the grandson who represented a future he had never dared to imagine. For 23 years, Jonah had been stuck in a holding pattern, his life revolving around the memory of what he had lost. Now, standing on the precipice of this new chapter, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time, the exhilarating, terrifying sensation of falling. As he turned back into the house, his eyes fell on a photograph of Kayla, taken just months before her diagnosis. She was laughing, her eyes alight with joy and mischief. For the first time in years, the sight didn't fill him with paralyzing grief. Instead, he felt a bittersweet warmth. "I'll take care of them, Kayla," he whispered to the photograph. "I promise." With that vow echoing in his heart, Jonah Wilson stepped into his study to prepare for the battles ahead, both in the boardroom and in the complex, beautiful mess of family life that now lay before him. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a crispness in the air hinting at the changing seasons. Jonah found himself awake far earlier than usual, his mind racing with the revelations of the previous day. He made his way to the kitchen, absently reaching for the coffee pot. As the rich aroma filled the air, he couldn't help but smile at the memory of Kayla teasing him about his coffee addiction. "One day," she'd often joked, "I'm going to find you passed out in a pool of espresso." The fond memory was interrupted by the harsh ring of his cell phone. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was Marcus Reeves, the CEO of Tech Innovations and his newest business partner. "Marcus?" Jonah answered, his voice automatically shifting into his business tone. "You're up early." "Jonah!" Marcus's voice was tense. "We've got a problem. The SEC investigation, it's not just about the subsidiary. They're looking into the entire merger." Jonah felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What are they saying?" "Insider trading allegations. They think we had access to non-public information that influenced the deal." "That's ridiculous," Jonah snapped. "Every aspect of this merger has been above board." "I know that, and you know that," Marcus replied. "But the SEC doesn't seem convinced. They're requesting all our communications, financial records, everything." Jonah pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache forming. "All right, I'll have our legal team prepare everything. We've got nothing to hide, Marcus. This will blow over." As he hung up, Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger storm. The merger with Tech Innovations had been a bold move, one that had reinvigorated his company and, if he was honest with himself, his own passion for the business. The thought of it all falling apart now, just as he was on the cusp of rebuilding his personal life as well, was almost too much to bear. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Annabelle. "Good morning. Just wanted to confirm dinner tonight. Gordon's excited to see his grandpa. Still feels weird to say that. Let me know if 7 p.m. works for you." The message, so normal and domestic, felt like a lifeline in the midst of the brewing corporate crisis. Jonah found himself smiling as he typed his reply. 7 p.m. is perfect. Looking forward to it. And for the record, being called Grandpa feels pretty weird on this end too. But I like it. As he hit send, Jonah felt a renewed sense of determination. He had faced challenges in business before, had weathered storms that would have sunk lesser companies. He would handle this SEC investigation the same way he handled everything else, with unwavering focus and an iron will. But as he showered and dressed for the day ahead, Jonah couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was different this time. For the first time in decades, he had something to lose beyond just money and reputation. He had a family now, however unconventional, and the thought of disappointing Annabelle and Gordon, of this corporate scandal tainting their newfound relationship, filled him with a dread he hadn't experienced since Kayla's illness. As he knotted his tie, Jonah caught his reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at him looked older, more vulnerable than the corporate titan the world was used to seeing, but there was also a spark in his eyes that had been missing for far too long. "You can do this," he told his reflection. "For them, for Kayla, for yourself." With one last glance at Kayla's photograph on the dresser, Jonah squared his shoulders and headed out to face whatever challenges the day might bring. Little did he know, the SEC investigation was just the tip of the iceberg. As he would soon discover, the past had a way of resurfacing in the most unexpected and dangerous ways, and the foundations of the new life he was building with Annabelle and Gordon were about to be shaken to their very core. As Jonah navigated the bustling streets of Boston in his sleek black sedan, his mind raced between the looming SEC investigation and the dinner with Annabelle and Gordon later that evening. The juxtaposition of his professional crisis and newfound family life created a storm of emotions he struggled to process. Pulling into the underground parking of his office building, Jonah was greeted by Sarah, his ever-efficient assistant, the moment he stepped out of the elevator. "Mr. Wilson," she said, falling into step beside him, "I've gathered the team in the conference room. Legal is already reviewing all documents related to the Tech Innovations merger." Jonah nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Good. And Sarah, I need you to clear my schedule after 6 p.m. today. I have a personal engagement." Sarah's eyebrow raised slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise. "Of course, Mr. Wilson. I'll make the necessary adjustments." As Jonah entered the conference room, he was met with a sea of anxious faces. His top executives, legal team, and PR specialists all turned to him, seeking reassurance and direction. For a moment, Jonah felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but then, unbidden, an image of Gordon's smiling face flashed in his mind, and he felt a surge of strength. "All right, people," he began, his voice steady and authoritative. "I know we're facing a serious situation here, but I want to make one thing clear. We have nothing to hide. This company has always operated with integrity, and that's not going to change now. We're going to cooperate fully with the SEC, provide them with every document they request, and prove that this merger was entirely above board." As the meeting progressed, Jonah found himself more engaged and passionate than he had been in years. He challenged his team, pushed for innovative solutions, and refused to accept defeatist attitudes. It was as if the spark that had been reignited by Annabelle and Gordon had spread to every aspect of his life. Hours flew by, and before Jonah knew it, Sarah was discreetly reminding him of the time. As he prepared to leave, his phone buzzed with another text from Annabelle. "Hey, just wanted to check if we're still on for tonight. Gordon's been practicing saying Grandpa all day. It's adorable if a bit garbled." A warm smile spread across Jonah's face, drawing curious glances from his team. "I'll be there," he typed back. "Can't wait to hear it." As Jonah left the office, he felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. The corporate world, with its clear rules and predictable patterns, had been his comfort zone for so long. This new terrain of family dinners and grandfather duties was thrilling, but also terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Arriving home, Jonah found himself standing in front of his closet, paralyzed by an unexpected dilemma. What does one wear to a family dinner when one has been a solitary, grieving widower for over 2 decades? His hand hovered over his usual array of impeccably tailored suits before settling on a more casual sweater and slacks combination. As he changed, his eyes fell on a small, ornate box on his dresser. With trembling hands, he opened it, revealing 2 simple gold bands, his and Kayla's wedding rings. He had removed his the day after her funeral, unable to bear the constant reminder of what he had lost. Now, he found himself slipping it back on, the cool metal a comforting weight on his finger. "What do you think, Kayla?" he murmured to the empty room. Am I doing the right thing? The drive to Annabelle's modest apartment was filled with a nervous energy Jonah hadn't experienced since his first date with Kayla. As he parked and made his way to the front door, A burst of childish laughter from inside made him pause, his hand hovering over the doorbell. This was it. A turning point. Once he stepped through that door, there was no going back to the solitary existence he had maintained for so long. Was he ready for this? Could he be the grandfather Gordon deserved, the father figure Annabelle needed? Before he could spiral further into doubt, the door swung open, revealing Annabelle's smiling face. "I thought I heard a car," she said warmly. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." As Jonah stepped inside, he was immediately enveloped in the warm, homey atmosphere. The small apartment was cluttered but cozy, filled with the scent of home cooking and the happy babbles of a toddler. Gordon, seated in a high chair, let out a squeal of delight at the sight of Jonah. "Garpa!" Gordon exclaimed, his chubby hands reaching out. Jonah felt his heart melt. Without thinking, he moved to the high chair and scooped Gordon into his arms. "Hello, little man," he said softly, marveling at how natural it felt. Annabelle watched the interaction with misty eyes. "He's been so excited all day," she said. "I think he knows you're special." As they settled in for dinner, Jonah found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Gordon's occasional interjections and attempts to feed Jonah bits of mashed potato. "So," Annabelle said as they were finishing up, "I've been thinking about Kayla's letter, the one she left with the adoption agency." Jonah nodded, his expression turning serious. "I've made some inquiries. It's not going to be easy to track down, given that the agency closed years ago, but I have some contacts who might be able to help." Annabelle bit her lip, looking uncertain. Do you think we should? I mean, part of me desperately wants to know what she wrote, but another part is scared. What if it changes everything?" Jonah reached across the table, taking Annabelle's hand in his. "Whatever that letter says, it won't change the fact that Kayla loved you. And it won't change what we're building here as a family, but I think we both deserve to know, to have that final connection with her." Tears welled up in Annabelle's eyes, and she squeezed Jonah's hand gratefully. "You're right. We'll face it together, whatever it says." As the evening wound down, Jonah found himself on the floor with Gordon, building a precarious tower of blocks. The simple joy of the moment struck him profoundly. This, he realized, was what he had been missing all these years. Not just the memory of Kayla, but the living, breathing continuation of her legacy. "He has her eyes, you know," Annabelle said softly, watching them play. "I never understood why people said I had my mother's eyes when my adoptive mum's were a different color, but now I see it. In both of us." Jonah looked up, meeting Annabelle's gaze. In that moment, he saw not just Kayla, but a beautiful blend of past and future. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you do." As Jonah prepared to leave, Gordon already fast asleep in his room, Annabelle walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means a lot, especially with everything going on at work. I saw the news about the SEC investigation." Jonah tensed slightly, reminded of the challenges waiting for him in the morning. "It's nothing for you to worry about," he assured her. "Just a misunderstanding that we'll clear up soon." Annabelle nodded, but her expression remained concerned. "Just be careful, okay? Gordon and I, we're just getting used to having you in our lives. We don't want to lose you." Touched by her concern, Jonah pulled Annabelle into a gentle hug. "You won't lose me," he promised. "No matter what happens with the company, you and Gordon are my priority now. We're family." As Jonah drove home that night, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. The warmth of the evening with Annabelle and Gordon contrasted sharply with the looming specter of the SEC investigation. He knew that the coming days and weeks would be challenging, forcing him to balance his newfound family life with the demands of saving his company's reputation. But for the first time in years, Jonah felt truly alive. The risks, the uncertainties, the potential for both joy and heartbreak. It all reminded him of Kayla's words on that beach so long ago. Some things are worth the risk. As he pulled into his driveway, Jonah's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from an unknown sender, with a subject line that made his blood run cold. The truth about Kayla Wilson and Annabelle Murray. Jonah's hand hovered over the phone, his heart pounding. Whatever was in that email had the potential to shatter the fragile new reality he was building, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. With a deep breath, he opened the email, bracing himself for whatever revelations or threats it might contain. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. Mr. Wilson, you think you know the truth about your wife's past, but you've only scratched the surface. Kayla Wilson's secret goes far deeper than a child given up for adoption. If you want to protect Annabelle and your company, meet me at the old Harborside warehouse tomorrow at midnight. Come alone or the SEC will be the least of your worries. A friend. Jonah stared at the screen, his mind reeling. Just when he thought he had come to terms with Kayla's secret, this mysterious message threatened to upend everything once again. The implication that there was more to the story, something potentially damaging enough to threaten both Annabelle and his company, filled him with dread. As he sat in his car, the engine cooling in the quiet night, Jonah faced a crossroads. Should he dismiss this as a cruel prank or a misguided attempt at extortion? Or was there really more to Kayla's past that he didn't know? The rational businessman in him said to ignore it, to focus on the SEC investigation and his budding relationship with Annabelle and Gordon. But the part of him that had loved Kayla, that still loved her, couldn't let it go. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. With a heavy sigh, Jonah made his decision. He would meet this mysterious friend and face whatever new challenge awaited him. But first he had a promise to keep. Picking up his phone once more, he dialed a number he now knew by heart. Annabelle answered on the second ring, her voice warm and slightly sleepy. "Jonah, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he assured her, pushing down the guilt he felt at the partial lie. "I just wanted to say goodnight, and to tell you that I'm glad you and Gordon are in my life." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Annabelle spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "We're glad you're in our lives too, Jonah. Good night." As he ended the call, Jonah looked up at the night sky, the stars obscured by the city lights. Somewhere out there, he thought, Kayla was watching over them. Whatever secrets still lurked in the shadows of the past, he would face them. For Annabelle, for Gordon, for the memory of Kayla, and for the man he was finally allowing himself to become. With renewed determination, Jonah stepped out of his car and walked into his house. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, both known and unknown. But for tonight, he would hold on to the warmth of family and the hope of new beginnings. Whatever storm was brewing on the horizon, he would weather it. After all, as Kayla had taught him, some things were indeed worth the risk. The Harborside warehouse loomed before Jonah, a hulking shadow against the moonlit sky. The salt-tinged air carried whispers of the city's maritime past, but tonight it felt charged with something more ominous. Jonah checked his watch. 11:55 p.m. He was early, but he couldn't bear to wait in his car any longer. As he approached the rusted gate, memories of the day flashed through his mind. The tense meetings with his legal team, the reassuring call to Annabelle explaining he had a late night at the office, the weight of the secret he now carried. With each step, he questioned his decision to come alone, to keep this meeting hidden from everyone. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Jonah's hand instinctively tightened around the small recording device in his pocket. "Mr. Wilson," the figure said, stepping into a pool of dim light. It was a man, older than Jonah had expected, with a face etched by years of hard living. "I'm glad you came." Jonah's voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil he felt. "You said you had information about my wife, about Kayla." The man nodded, his eyes darting around as if expecting to be overheard. "I knew Kayla before you did, before Annabelle. What I'm about to tell you, it changes everything." For the next hour, Jonah listened as the man who identified himself only as Jack unraveled a tale that seemed almost too fantastical to be true. Kayla, it turned out, had been involved in something far more complex and dangerous than a teenage pregnancy. She had been part of a whistleblower group exposing corporate corruption at the highest levels. Her pregnancy with Annabelle had been the result of a relationship with another member of the group, a man who was later killed under mysterious circumstances. Kayla gave up Annabelle to protect her, Jack explained, his voice heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. She walked away from everything, the group, the fight, her own child, to keep Annabelle safe. And then she met you, built a new life. But the past, it never really goes away, does it? Jonah's mind reeled. "Why are you telling me this now, after all these years?" Jack's expression darkened. "Because the people Kayla helped expose, they're still out there, and they know about Annabelle. Your SEC troubles? That's just the beginning. They'll destroy everything you've built, everything Kayla sacrificed for, unless..." Unless what? Jonah demanded, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Unless you finish what Kayla started, Jack said, pulling out a USB drive. Everything she uncovered, everything we've gathered since, it's all here. You have the resources, the influence to bring it all to light. To finish the fight Kayla had to abandon. As Jonah drove home in the early hours of the morning, the USB drive felt like a lead weight in his pocket. His mind was a tempest of emotions, shock at the revelations about Kayla's past, fear for Annabelle and Gordon's safety, and a gnawing uncertainty about what to do next. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Jonah finally pulled into his driveway. As he stepped out of the car, a familiar voice called out to him. "Jonah?" He turned to see Annabelle standing on the sidewalk, Gordon balanced on her hip. She looked worried, her brow furrowed in concern. "Annabelle, what are you doing here so early?" She shifted Gordon to her other hip, her eyes searching Jonah's face. "I've been trying to reach you all night. When you didn't answer, I got worried." "Jonah, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept." For a moment, Jonah considered lying, brushing off her concerns with some excuse about work. But as he looked at Annabelle, at Kayla's daughter, he knew he couldn't keep this from her. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful. "We need to talk," he said softly. "But not here. Come inside." Over the next few hours, as Gordon napped peacefully in the guest room, Jonah recounted everything he had learned from Jack. Annabelle listened in stunned silence, her face a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a deep, aching sadness. "So my father, he was killed because of this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonah nodded, reaching out to take her hand. "I'm so sorry, Annabelle. I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be." Annabelle's grip on his hand tightened. "What do we do now? If what this Jack says is true, we're all in danger." Jonah's jaw set in determination. "We finish what Kayla started. We bring the truth to light, no matter the cost." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Jonah threw himself into investigating the information on the USB drive, using every resource at his disposal. He brought in trusted members of his team, sworn to secrecy, to help unravel the complex web of corporate corruption and cover-ups. Annabelle, despite Jonah's initial protests, insisted on being involved. "This is my mother's legacy," she argued. "Our legacy. I need to be part of this." As they worked side by side, poring over documents and connecting threads of evidence, Jonah found himself in awe of Annabelle's strength and resilience. She approached the task with a determination that reminded him so much of Kayla, it sometimes took his breath away. One evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups, Annabelle suddenly laughed, a sound so unexpected in the tense atmosphere that Jonah looked up in surprise. "What's so funny?" Annabelle shook her head, a wry smile on her face. "It's just, a month ago my biggest worry was whether I could afford a new stroller for Gordon. Now I'm in the middle of uncovering a massive corporate conspiracy. Life's funny sometimes, isn't it?" Jonah couldn't help but chuckle. "That it is. Annabelle, I want you to know how proud I am of you, how proud Kayla would be." Annabelle's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you, Jonah. That means more than you know." As the days turned into weeks, their investigation began to bear fruit. They uncovered evidence of widespread corruption, bribery, and environmental violations that spanned multiple corporations and even touched on government officials. The scope of it was staggering, and the potential fallout enormous. But as they got closer to the truth, the danger increased. Strange cars began appearing outside Jonah's house and Annabelle's apartment. Threatening messages were left on their voicemails. The SEC investigation into Jonah's company intensified, with new allegations surfacing almost daily. Through it all, Jonah and Annabelle grew closer. Their shared mission, the weight of Kayla's legacy, and the bonds of their newfound family strengthened their relationship in ways neither had anticipated. One night, after a particularly grueling day of dodging reporters and fielding calls from worried board members, Jonah found Annabelle on his back porch, staring up at the stars. Gordon was asleep inside under the watchful eye of a trusted security team. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Jonah asked, settling into the chair beside her. Annabelle was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I keep thinking about Kayla, about the choice she made to give me up. I used to be so angry about it, you know. But now I understand. She was so brave, Jonah. Braver than I ever knew." Jonah nodded, his own thoughts turning to Kayla. She was the bravest person I've ever known. And I see that same bravery in you, Annabelle. She turned to him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. Do you think she'd be proud of us, of what we're doing? I know she would, Jonah said without hesitation. We're finishing what she started. We're protecting you, protecting Gordon. That's all she ever wanted. Annabelle reached out, taking Jonah's hand in hers. I'm glad we found each other, Jonah. I'm glad we get to do this together. As they sat there, hand in hand, Jonah felt a sense of peace wash over him. Despite the dangers they faced, despite the uncertain future ahead, he knew they were on the right path. They were honoring Kayla's memory, protecting her legacy, and in the process, forging a bond that went beyond blood. The next morning brought a new challenge. Jonah's phone rang early, his lawyer's voice tense on the other end of the line. Jonah, the SEC is moving to freeze your assets. They're claiming you've been using company funds for personal use. We need to act fast. Jonah's mind raced. He knew this was another attempt to derail their investigation, to cut off their resources. But fighting it would mean going public with what they knew, potentially exposing Annabelle and Gordon to even greater danger. He found Annabelle in the kitchen, feeding Gordon his breakfast. One look at Jonah's face, and she knew something was wrong. What is it? She asked, wiping Gordon's face with a soft cloth. Jonah explained the situation, watching as Annabelle's expression hardened with resolve. We have to go public, she said, her voice steady. It's the only way to protect ourselves, to make sure the truth comes out. Jonah shook his head. Annabelle, the risk is worth it, she interrupted. Mom taught us both that, didn't she? Some things are worth the risk. In that moment, looking at Annabelle's determined face, so like Kayla's, Jonah knew she was right. They had come too far, uncovered too much, to back down now. All right, he said, squeezing her shoulder gently. Let's do this. Together. The press conference was hastily arranged, security tight around the venue. As Jonah stood at the podium, Annabelle by his side, he felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment of truth. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice strong and clear, I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Wilson Enterprises, but as a man who has uncovered a truth that can no longer remain hidden. For the next hour, Jonah and Annabelle laid out their findings. They presented evidence of corporate malfeasance on a massive scale, of cover-ups that spanned decades. They spoke of Kayla's involvement, of her sacrifice, and of their commitment to seeing justice done. As they fielded questions from the stunned reporters, Jonah felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Whatever came next, the truth was out. Kayla's fight, their fight, was now in the open. The aftermath was immediate and intense. News outlets exploded with the revelations. Stock markets fluctuated wildly as implicated companies scrambled to respond. Government agencies launched investigations, and public outrage grew as the full scope of the corruption came to light. For Jonah and Annabelle, the days that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, depositions, and security briefings. They were hailed as heroes by some, vilified by others. But through it all, they stood firm, united in their commitment to seeing justice done. One evening, about a week after the press conference, Jonah found Annabelle in his study, looking at the old photograph of Kayla. I wish I had known her, Annabelle said softly, as Jonah entered the room. He moved to stand beside her, his eyes also drawn to Kayla's smiling face. She would have loved you so much, Annabelle, and she would have been so proud of the woman you've become. Annabelle leaned her head on Jonah's shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting over the past weeks. I'm proud of us, Jonah, of what we've done, of the family we've become. Jonah wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling a surge of paternal love. So am I, Annabelle. So am I. As they stood there, united in their love for Kayla and for each other, Jonah realized how far they had come, from strangers bound by a secret past to a family forged in the fires of adversity. They had faced their fears, confronted painful truths, and emerged stronger for it. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be legal battles to fight, threats to face, and a new normal to adjust to. But Jonah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family. As if on cue, Gordon's cry echoed from the other room. Annabelle chuckled, straightening up. Duty calls, she said with a smile. Jonah watched her go, then turned back to Kayla's photograph. We did it, love, he whispered. We finished what you started, and we found each other in the process. Thank you for leading us here." With a final glance at the photo, Jonah turned and followed Annabelle's voice, ready to embrace whatever the future held for their unconventional but loving family. The following weeks were a testament to their resilience and determination. As the legal proceedings unfolded and the full extent of the corruption came to light, Jonah and Annabelle found themselves at the center of a media storm. Every day brought new challenges, from intense scrutiny of their personal lives to veiled threats from those whose misdeeds they had exposed. Through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their growing bond. Jonah, who had spent decades building walls around his heart, found himself opening up in ways he never thought possible. He shared stories of his life with Kayla, the joy of their early years together, and the pain of her loss. Annabelle, in turn, opened up about her struggles as a young single mother, her fears and doubts, and her unwavering love for Gordon. One particularly trying day, after a grueling deposition that had dredged up painful memories for both of them, they found themselves in Jonah's living room, emotionally drained but unwilling to be alone. "I keep thinking about what my life would have been like if Kayla had kept me," Annabelle said softly, cradling a sleeping Gordon in her arms. "But then I look at Gordon, and I realize everything that happened led me here, to him, to you." Jonah nodded, understanding the complex mix of emotions she was grappling with. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Kayla's decision, as painful as it was, protected you. And now, here we are, protecting her legacy together. Annabelle's eyes welled with tears. I wish I could talk to her just once, to tell her I understand, that I forgive her, that I'm grateful for the sacrifice she made." Jonah reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "She knows, Annabelle. Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud of you just as I am." As the legal proceedings progressed, Jonah found himself facing a difficult decision. The board of directors, nervous about the company's future in light of the scandal, was pushing for his resignation. They argued that the company needed a fresh start, untainted by the controversy. Jonah called a family meeting, a concept that still felt new and precious to him. He, Annabelle, and Gordon, babbling happily in his high chair, gathered around the dining table. "They want me to step down," Jonah explained, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "And part of me thinks maybe they're right. Maybe the company does need a new direction." Annabelle listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. "But is that what you want, Jonah? After everything we've been through, everything we've fought for?" Jonah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. For so long the company was all I had. It was my purpose, my legacy. But now—" He trailed off, his eyes moving from Annabelle to Gordon. Annabelle understood the unspoken words. Now he had a family, a different kind of legacy. "Whatever you decide," Annabelle said firmly, "we're behind you, 100%. Gordon chose that moment to slam his little hands on the high chair tray, sending Cheerios flying everywhere. The tension broke as Jonah and Annabelle burst into laughter. "I think that's Gordon's way of agreeing," Annabelle chuckled, reaching over to clean up the mess. Jonah watched them, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Jonah called a press conference. Standing at the podium with Annabelle and Gordon, dressed in an adorable little suit by his side, he addressed the world. Jonah took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowd of reporters and cameras before him. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but the presence of Annabelle and Gordon beside him gave him strength. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Over the past weeks, we have unveiled a web of corruption that has shaken the foundations of corporate America. Today, I stand before you not just as the CEO of Wilson Enterprises, but as a man who has been given a second chance at family, at purpose, and at leaving a legacy I can be proud of." He paused, looking down at Annabelle, who gave him an encouraging nod. "It would be easy to step down, to walk away from the company I've built and the challenges we now face, but that is not the example I want to set for my grandson," he said, smiling at Gordon, who was contentedly chewing on his tie. "Nor is it the legacy I want to leave for my daughter." A murmur rippled through the crowd at this public acknowledgement of his relationship with Annabelle. "I am not stepping down," Jonah continued, his voice growing stronger. "Instead, I am committed to rebuilding Wilson Enterprises from the ground up. We will be a model of corporate transparency and ethical business practices." We will make amends for past wrongs and work tirelessly to regain the trust of our employees, our shareholders, and the public. He turned to Annabel, extending his hand. She stepped forward, adjusting Gordon on her hip. To that end, I am proud to announce that Annabel Murray will be joining the company as our new Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. Her insight, her integrity, and her commitment to justice will be invaluable as we chart this new course. Annabel's eyes widened in surprise. They hadn't discussed this, but as she looked at Jonah, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Together, Jonah concluded, we will honor the legacy of Kayla Wilson, a woman who believed that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. We will build a company and a family that she would be proud of. Thank you. The press conference erupted into a frenzy of questions, but Jonah, Annabel, and Gordon exited the stage, a united front against the storm of flashing cameras. Back at Jonah's house, as Gordon napped peacefully in the guest room that had slowly transformed into his nursery, Jonah and Annabel sat in the study, processing the events of the day. Director of Corporate Social Responsibility, Annabel said, a hint of amusement in her voice. That's quite a title, Jonah. Are you sure about this? Jonah nodded, his expression serious. I've never been more sure of anything. Annabel, you've shown more integrity and courage in the past few weeks than most people do in a lifetime. The company needs that. I need that. Annabel was quiet for a moment, considering. It's a big change, she said finally. I don't have a business background. I was a kindergarten teacher before Gordon was born. And that's exactly why you're perfect for this role, Jonah insisted. You understand people, Annabel. You have a natural empathy that can't be taught in any business school. Plus, you've got a vested interest in making sure the company operates ethically. It's Gordon's inheritance, after all. At the mention of Gordon, Annabel's expression softened. I never imagined this for us, you know. When I started looking for my birth parents, I thought maybe I'd find some medical history, maybe a photo or two. I never dreamed I'd gain a father and a future for my son. Jonah reached out, taking her hand in his. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? I spent so many years focused on the past, on what I'd lost. Now, thanks to you and Gordon, I'm finally looking forward again. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of Gordon's cries coming through the baby monitor. Annabel started to rise, but Jonah stopped her. Let me, he said, standing up. It's about time I learned how to change a diaper. Annabel laughed, settling back into her chair. Oh, this I have to see. Don't forget to duck if he decides to, express himself. Jonah chuckled as he left the room, feeling a lightness in his step that had been absent for far too long. Over the next few months, Jonah and Annabel threw themselves into their new roles, both at the company and as a family. The challenges were immense. Rebuilding Wilson Enterprises' reputation was an uphill battle, with skeptical shareholders and a wary public watching their every move. Annabel's first major initiative was to establish a whistleblower protection program within the company, ensuring that employees at all levels felt safe reporting any unethical practices they encountered. It was a move that initially made the board nervous, but Jonah backed her completely. This is exactly why I brought you on board, he told her after a particularly heated board meeting. We need to change the culture from the ground up, and that starts with transparency and accountability. Annabel nodded, but Jonah could see the doubt in her eyes. What is it? He asked gently. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for this, Jonah. The corporate world is so different from anything I've experienced before. What if I'm in over my head? Jonah led her to the window overlooking the city. Do you see that building there? He asked, pointing to a sleek skyscraper in the distance. When I started this company, that was our first office. It was a tiny space, barely big enough for a desk and a coffee machine. I had no idea what I was doing either, but I learned, I adapted, and I built something great. He turned to face her, his expression serious. You have something I didn't have back then, Annabel. You have a purpose beyond just making money. You're here to make a difference, to leave a better world for Gordon. That purpose will guide you, even when things get tough. Annabel smiled, feeling her confidence return. Thank you, Jonah. I needed to hear that. As they worked to rebuild the company, their personal lives continued to evolve as well. Jonah found himself spending more and more time at Annabel's apartment, claiming it was easier than having her and Gordon commute to his place. In reality, he had grown accustomed to the sounds of family life. Gordon's laughter, the clatter of toys, even the occasional tantrum. One evening, as they sat on Annabelle's small balcony after putting Gordon to bed, Jonah broached a subject that had been on his mind for weeks. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice hesitant. "My house. It's too big for just me. And your place, as lovely as it is getting a bit cramped with all of Gordon's things." Annabelle looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Are you proposing what I think you're proposing?" Jonah chuckled, feeling suddenly nervous. "I suppose I am. What would you think about us all living together? We could look for a new place, something that fits all of us." Annabelle was quiet for a moment, and Jonah felt his heart race. Had he overstepped? Was it too soon? Finally, she spoke. "I think," she said slowly, "that Gordon would love having his grandpa around all the time. And I would love it too." The relief and joy Jonah felt was overwhelming. He pulled Annabelle into a hug, feeling truly at home for the first time in decades. The process of finding a new home that suited their unconventional family was an adventure in itself. Jonah, used to making quick decisions in the business world, found himself agonizing over details like the safety of staircases for a toddler and the proximity to good schools. Annabelle, for her part, had to adjust to the idea of living in the kind of luxury Jonah was accustomed to. "Gordon doesn't need a playroom the size of my entire apartment," she argued during one house viewing. "But think of all the educational toys we could fit in there," Jonah countered, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of spoiling his grandson. In the end, they settled on a spacious but not ostentatious house in a quiet neighborhood. It had a large backyard for Gordon to play in, a home office for Jonah, and plenty of room for their family to grow. Moving day was a chaotic affair. Jonah, used to delegating such tasks, found himself elbow-deep in boxes, following Annabelle's instructions on where everything should go. Gordon helped by unpacking toys as quickly as they were packed, leaving a trail of stuffed animals and blocks in his wake. As evening fell and Gordon was finally asleep in his new room, Jonah and Annabelle collapsed onto the couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "Well," Jonah said, looking around at the chaos, "this is certainly not how I imagined my life would be at this age." Annabelle laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Having second thoughts?" Jonah wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Not for a second. This feels right. Like we're finally where we're supposed to be." As they sat there, surrounded by the beginnings of their new life together, Jonah felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since Kayla's passing. He thought of her often, wondering what she would think of this unexpected turn of events. Somehow he knew she would approve. The following months brought new challenges and joys. Jonah, who had never changed a diaper before Gordon came into his life, now found himself an expert in middle-of-the-night feedings and the intricacies of toddler-proofing a home. Annabelle, meanwhile, continued to make waves at Wilson Enterprises, her fresh perspective and unwavering commitment to ethics slowly but surely changing the company's culture. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as Jonah pushed Gordon on the swing in their backyard, Annabelle approached with a letter in her hand, her expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It came," she said, holding up the envelope, "from the adoption agency's archives. They found Kayla's letter." Jonah's heart skipped a beat. After months of searching, of legal battles and bureaucratic red tape, they had finally tracked down the letter Kayla had left for Annabelle all those years ago. He lifted Gordon from the swing, holding him close. "Do you want to read it now?" he asked gently. Annabelle nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the envelope. Together they sat on the grass, Gordon contentedly playing with dandelions at their feet, as Annabelle began to read aloud. "My dearest Annabelle, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way back to me in a way. I hope this letter finds you happy, healthy, and loved. There's so much I want to tell you, so much I need you to understand. First and foremost, I want you to know that giving you up was the hardest decision I've ever made. You were and always will be the best thing that ever happened to me, but the world I was living in then was no place for a child. I was young, scared, and involved in things that put us both in danger. I chose adoption not because I didn't want you, but because I wanted more for you than I could provide. I wanted you to have a chance at a normal life, free from the shadows that haunted mine. There's so much I wish I could tell you about your father, about the work we were doing. But even now, years later, that knowledge could be dangerous. What I can tell you is that he was brave, kind, and would have loved you more than anything in this world. I hope that you can forgive me for not being there to watch you grow up. I hope that the family who adopted you gave you all the love and support I wished I could have provided. And I hope that you've grown into a woman who is strong, compassionate, and unafraid to stand up for what's right. Know that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you, loved you, and been grateful for the brief time we had together. You are, and always will be, my greatest love and my greatest sacrifice. Whatever path your life has taken, whatever joys and sorrows you've experienced, please know that you were wanted, you were loved, and you were the best decision I ever made. With all my love, forever and always, your mother, Kayla. As Annabelle finished reading, her voice choked with emotion, Jonah pulled her into a tight embrace. Gordon, sensing the emotional moment, toddled over and wrapped his little arms around both of them. In that moment, surrounded by the love of his newfound family, Jonah felt the last pieces of his heart healing. The past, present, and future had aligned in a way he never could have imagined, bringing with it a sense of purpose and belonging he had thought lost forever. As they sat there, holding each other under the warm sun, Jonah silently thanked Kayla for her sacrifice, for her love, and for the unexpected gift she had given him, a second chance at family, at love, and at leaving a legacy that truly mattered. The journey ahead would not be easy. There were still challenges to face, both in their personal lives and in the ongoing transformation of Wilson Enterprises. But together, united by love, by shared purpose, and by the enduring legacy of Kayla Wilson, they were ready to face whatever the future might hold. The autumn chill hung in the air as Jonah Wilson stood at the window of his office, overlooking the bustling streets of Boston. The city was awash in the golden hues of falling leaves, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the walls of Wilson Enterprises. It had been 18 months since the press conference that had changed everything. 18 months of rebuilding, of fights in the boardroom and battles in the courtroom. 18 months of sleepless nights and hard-won victories. And now, it all came down to this. Jonah's phone buzzed, a message from Annabelle lighting up the screen. "Board members are arriving, are you ready?" He took a deep breath, straightening his tie. "As ready as I'll ever be," he typed back. "See you in there." As Jonah made his way to the boardroom, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The company he had built from the ground up was hanging in the balance, its fate to be decided in the next few hours. But more than that, the future of his family, of Annabelle and Gordon, hinged on what transpired in that room. The boardroom was tense as Jonah entered, the air thick with anticipation. Board members sat around the large oak table, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Annabelle was already there, her posture straight and confident, though Jonah could see the worry in her eyes. "Good morning, everyone," Jonah began, his voice steady despite the nerves churning in his stomach. "I know there's been a lot of speculation about the purpose of this emergency meeting. Today we're here to make a decision that will shape the future of Wilson Enterprises for years to come." He paused, looking each board member in the eye. "For the past year and a half we've been working tirelessly to rebuild this company's reputation, to transform our business practices, and to become a leader in corporate responsibility. It hasn't been easy. We've faced skepticism, legal challenges, and financial setbacks, but we've also seen progress. Our ethical initiatives, spearheaded by Annabelle, have begun to bear fruit. Employee satisfaction is up, and we're starting to regain the trust of our clients and the public." Jonah could see nods of agreement around the table. It was true. The changes they'd implemented had begun to show positive results, but he knew what was coming next would be the real test. "However," he continued, his voice growing serious, "we're at a crossroads. The pending merger with Greentech Industries presents us with an unprecedented opportunity for growth. Their sustainable technology could revolutionize our product line and cement our position as an industry leader in eco-friendly solutions." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. The Greentech merger had been the talk of the business world for weeks, seen by many as the key to Wilson Enterprises' comeback. "But," Jonah said, holding up a hand to quiet the murmurs, "there's a complication. Late last night, I received information that casts a shadow over Greentech's operations." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Jonah. "An anonymous whistleblower has provided evidence suggesting that Greentech's impressive sustainability metrics may be the result of manipulated data. If these allegations are true, Going through with this merger could undo everything we've worked for. It could destroy the trust we've fought so hard to rebuild. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Questions and accusations flew across the table. Jonah stood firm, waiting for the initial shock to subside. "Mr. Wilson," Edward Blackwell, one of the senior board members, spoke up. "Are you suggesting we cancel the merger based on unsubstantiated claims from an anonymous source? Do you realize what that would do to our stock prices, to our future?" Jonah nodded, understanding the concern. "I realize the gravity of this situation, Edward. That's why I've called this meeting. We need to decide as a company how to proceed." Annabelle stood up, her voice clear and determined. "If I may, I'd like to present the ethical implications of our decision." As Annabelle laid out the potential consequences of proceeding with or cancelling the merger, Jonah watched the faces of the board members. He could see the conflict in their eyes, the battle between financial interests and ethical considerations. For the next several hours, the boardroom was a battleground of ideas and arguments. Financial projections were presented, ethical scenarios were debated, and the very soul of Wilson Enterprises hung in the balance. As the discussion raged on, Jonah's mind drifted to a conversation he'd had with Gordon just that morning. The little boy, now almost 3, had looked up at him with Kayla's eyes and asked, "Grandpa, are you a good guy or a bad guy?" The innocent question had struck Jonah to his core. In that moment, he'd realized that this decision was about more than just the company. It was about the legacy he would leave for Gordon, the example he would set. Jonah's reverie was broken by Annabelle's voice, strong and impassioned. "We have a responsibility," she was saying, "not just to our shareholders, but to our employees, our customers, and to future generations. If we compromise our principles now, what was the point of everything we fought for?" Her words hung in the air, and Jonah could see they had struck a chord with many in the room, but others remained skeptical, the allure of potential profits too strong to ignore. As the day wore on, it became clear that the board was deadlocked. Half were in favor of proceeding with the merger, arguing that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. The other half, swayed by Annabelle's arguments, advocated for caution and further investigation. In the end, all eyes turned to Jonah. As CEO and majority shareholder, the final decision rested with him. Jonah stood, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He thought of Kayla, of the sacrifices she had made in the name of doing what was right. He thought of Annabelle, of her unwavering commitment to ethics and her faith in him, and he thought of Gordon, of the world he wanted to leave for his grandson. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "I've listened to all of your arguments and I understand the stakes involved. This decision will indeed shape the future of Wilson Enterprises. But more than that, it will define who we are as a company and as individuals." He paused, looking around the room. "When I started this company, it was with the dream of building something that would last, something that would make a difference in the world. Along the way, I lost sight of that dream. I became focused on profits, on growth at any cost. It took a series of life-changing events to remind me of what truly matters." Jonah's eyes met Annabelle's, and he saw in them the strength and conviction that had brought them to this point. "We will not be proceeding with the merger," he announced, his voice gaining strength. "Instead, we will launch a full investigation into Greentech's practices. If the allegations prove false, we can revisit the merger with a clear conscience. If they're true, we'll have dodged a bullet and stayed true to our principles." The room erupted once again, this time with a mix of protests and sighs of relief. Jonah held up his hand for silence. "I know this decision will have immediate financial repercussions. Our stock will take a hit. We may lose some investors, but I believe in the long run, this is the right choice for our company, for our employees, and for the world we want to create." As the meeting adjourned, board members filed out, some shaking Jonah's hand in support, others avoiding his gaze. Annabelle remained behind, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You did it," she said softly. "You really did it." Jonah pulled her into a hug, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We did it," he corrected her. "I couldn't have done this without you, Annabelle. Your mother would be so proud." As they left the boardroom, Jonah's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made his blood run cold. "Wilson Enterprises stocks plummet amid rumors of cancelled merger." Annabelle read the alert over his shoulder, her face paling. "It's starting," she murmured. Jonah nodded grimly. "And this is just the beginning. We're in for a rough ride, Annabelle. Are you ready for this? She squared her shoulders, a determined glint in her eye. More than ready. We're doing the right thing, Jonah. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As they made their way through the office, Jonah could feel the eyes of his employees on him. News traveled fast in the corporate world, and he knew that by now everyone was aware of the decision he'd made. Some looked at him with admiration, others with confusion or disappointment. Just as they reached the elevator, a commotion near the reception desk caught their attention. A man was arguing loudly with security, demanding to see Jonah Wilson. "Sir, you need to calm down," one of the security guards was saying. "Mr. Wilson is not available." "Like hell he's not," the man shouted. "I've got information he needs to hear, and I'm not leaving until I talk to him." Jonah exchanged a glance with Annabelle before stepping forward. "I'm Jonah Wilson," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "What's this about?" The man turned, his face a mask of desperation and anger. "Mr. Wilson, my name is David Chen. I was an engineer at Green Tech Industries. I'm the one who sent you the whistleblower information." A hush fell over the lobby. Jonah could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. "Mr. Chen," he said carefully, "perhaps we should continue this conversation in private." David shook his head vehemently. "No, you don't understand. They know. Green Tech, they figured out it was me. I've been followed, my computer was hacked. I think they might be after my family." Annabelle stepped forward, her voice soothing. "Mr. Chen, we can help you, but we need to do this the right way. Please come with us." As they led David to a secure conference room, Jonah's mind raced. The stakes had just gotten much higher. This wasn't just about corporate ethics anymore. There were lives at risk. Once they were safely behind closed doors, David began to pour out his story. He spoke of years of data manipulation at Green Tech, of pressure from executives to meet impossible sustainability targets, of threats against anyone who dared to speak up. "I couldn't take it anymore," David said, his voice breaking. "When I heard about the merger, I knew I had to do something. Your company's commitment to ethics, it gave me hope. But now, God, what have I done?" Jonah leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "You did the right thing, Mr. Chen, and I promise you, we will do everything in our power to protect you and your family." As David continued to share details, Annabelle excused herself to make some calls. She returned a short while later, her expression grim. "I've spoken with our head of security," she said. "We're arranging safe housing for Mr. Chen and his family. But Jonah, there's something else. The SEC has announced a formal investigation into both Wilson Enterprises and Green Tech. They're requesting all documents related to the merger negotiations." Jonah felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected scrutiny, but not this quickly. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "We knew this might happen. We'll cooperate fully with the investigation. We have nothing to hide." As they worked to secure David and his family, the hours slipped by. It was late evening by the time Jonah and Annabelle finally left the office, both physically and emotionally drained. "Come home with me," Annabelle said as they stood in the parking garage. "Gordon's been asking for his grandpa, and after a day like today, I think we both could use some family time." Jonah nodded gratefully, too exhausted to argue. The drive to Annabelle's house was quiet, both of them lost in thought about the day's events and the challenges that lay ahead. As they pulled into the driveway, the front door burst open, and Gordon came running out, his face lit up with joy. "Grandpa! Mommy!" Jonah felt the tension of the day melt away as he scooped Gordon into his arms. "Hey, little man," he said, hugging the boy close. "Have you been good for Sarah?" Gordon nodded enthusiastically, launching into a detailed account of his day as they made their way inside. Jonah listened with rapt attention, marveling at the simple joys of a child's world. Later, after Gordon was tucked into bed, Jonah and Annabelle sat on the back porch, each nursing a glass of wine. The night was cool and clear, stars twinkling overhead. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Annabelle asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Jonah was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think we did the only thing we could do," he said finally. "It won't be easy. The next few months, maybe even years, are going to be tough. But when I look at Gordon, when I think about the world we want to leave for him, I know it's worth it." Annabelle reached out, taking his hand. "I'm proud of you, Jonah. And I know Mom would be too." As they sat there hand in hand, Jonah felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The SEC investigation ramped up, with agents combing through years of records from both Wilson Enterprises and Greentech. Jonah and Annabelle spent long hours in meetings with lawyers, preparing statements and strategizing their next moves. The media circus was relentless. News vans camped outside the Wilson Enterprises offices, reporters clamoring for statements and inside information. Jonah's decision to cancel the merger was dissected and debated on every business news channel. Through it all, Jonah and Annabelle presented a united front. They held press conferences, issued statements, and worked tirelessly to reassure employees and shareholders alike. One particularly grueling day, as they left yet another meeting with the legal team, Annabelle turned to Jonah, her face etched with worry. "Jonah, there's something we need to discuss. It's about Gordon." Jonah felt his heart skip a beat. "What is it? Is he okay?" Annabelle nodded quickly. "He's fine, physically, but he's been asking questions about why we're on TV, why people are saying mean things about you. He's scared, Jonah. And I don't know how to explain all of this to a 3-year-old. Jonah's heart sank. In the chaos of the past weeks, he had somehow forgotten how all of this might be affecting Gordon. "We'll talk to him together," he said, squeezing Annabelle's shoulder reassuringly. "We'll find a way to make him understand." That evening, they sat Gordon down in the living room. The little boy looked up at them with wide, worried eyes, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. "Gordon," Jonah began gently, "Mommy and I want to talk to you about what's been happening lately, about the things you've been seeing on TV." Gordon nodded solemnly. "Are you in trouble, Grandpa? Did you do something bad?" Jonah felt a lump form in his throat. "No, buddy, I didn't do anything bad. In fact, I'm trying very hard to do something good. But sometimes, doing the right thing can be difficult. It can make some people upset." Annabelle chimed in, her voice soft and reassuring. "You know how we always tell you to tell the truth even when it's hard? That's what Grandpa did. He told the truth about something important, even though he knew it might cause problems." Gordon seemed to consider this for a moment. "Like when I told you I broke the vase even though I was scared you'd be mad." Annabelle smiled, ruffling his hair. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. And just like we weren't really mad at you because you told the truth, the people who matter won't be mad at Grandpa. They'll understand he did the right thing." Jonah watched in awe as Gordon processed this information, his little face scrunched up in concentration. Finally, the boy looked up at him, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "So you're like a superhero, Grandpa, fighting the bad guys?" Jonah chuckled, pulling Gordon into a hug. "I don't know about superhero, buddy, but I'm trying my best to make the world a little bit better, for you and for a lot of other people." As Gordon drifted off to sleep that night, clutching his elephant and muttering about his superhero grandpa, Jonah felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about corporate ethics or personal legacy anymore. It was about building a better world for Gordon and all the children of his generation. The following morning, Jonah woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, he reached for it, his heart sinking as he saw the flood of missed calls and urgent messages. Something big had happened. As he scrolled through the notifications, one headline made his blood run cold. Greentech CEO found dead in apparent suicide. Wilson Enterprises implicated. "Annabelle," Jonah called out, his voice hoarse with shock. "We need to get to the office, now." The drive to Wilson Enterprises was tense, the car radio providing a constant stream of updates and speculation. Michael Greenberg, the CEO of Greentech, had been found dead in his home, an apparent suicide. A note had been discovered, reportedly detailing years of corporate fraud and implicating several high-ranking officials, including some at Wilson Enterprises. As they pulled into the underground parking, Jonah's phone rang. It was Jack, the mysterious informant who had first revealed Kayla's past to him. "Jonah," Jack's voice was urgent. "I assume you've heard the news. This goes deeper than you know. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. Come alone." Before Jonah could respond, the line went dead. He turned to Annabelle, conflict evident on his face. "Go," she said, understanding without him having to explain. "I'll handle things here. But Jonah, be careful. This feels dangerous." Jonah nodded, squeezing her hand before stepping out of the car. "I'll be back as soon as I can if anyone asks." "Emergency board meeting," Annabelle finished for him. "I've got this. Just Come back safe." An hour later, Jonah found himself in a secluded corner of the public garden, the same spot where he had first learned the truth about Kayla's past. Jack was already there, looking more haggard than Jonah had ever seen him. "What's going on, Jack?" Jonah demanded, forgoing any pleasantries. "What do you know about Greenberg's death?" Jack glanced around nervously before speaking. "It wasn't suicide, Jonah. Greenberg was murdered, and the people responsible, they're the same ones Kayla was investigating all those years ago." Jonah felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "What are you saying?" "The corruption Kayla uncovered, it never went away. It just went deeper underground. Greentech was part of it, but it's bigger than that. Government officials, multinational corporations, it's a whole network of fraud and environmental destruction." Jack pulled out a USB drive, pressing it into Jonah's hand. "This contains everything Kayla had uncovered, plus what I've managed to piece together since. You need to get this to the authorities, Jonah, but be careful. These people, they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens them." As Jack turned to leave, Jonah grabbed his arm. "Wait, why me? Why now?" Jack's eyes were sad as he responded. "Because Kayla trusted you, and because your actions with Wilson Enterprises have shown that you have the courage to do what's right, no matter the cost." With that, Jack disappeared into the bustling park, leaving Jonah alone with the weight of this new information. As Jonah rushed back to the office, his mind raced. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He knew that its contents could change everything, but it could also put him and his family in grave danger. Back at Wilson Enterprises, chaos reigned. News of Greenberg's death and the implications for the company had sent the stock into freefall. Employees huddled in groups, whispering nervously. The board was demanding an emergency meeting. Jonah found Annabelle in his office, her face pale with worry. "What did you find out?" she asked as soon as he entered. Jonah closed the door, lowering his voice. "It's bigger than we thought, Annabelle, much bigger. Greenberg didn't kill himself, he was murdered." Annabelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Jonah, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Before Jonah could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Sarah, Jonah's assistant, poked her head in. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the FBI is here. They're asking to speak with you." Jonah and Annabelle exchanged a look of alarm. This was it. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than they'd anticipated. "Send them in, Sarah," Jonah said, straightening his tie. "And could you please call my lawyer? Tell him it's urgent." As two stern-faced FBI agents entered the office, Jonah felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He thought of Kayla, of her courage in the face of danger. He thought of Gordon, of the world he wanted to create for his grandson. And he thought of Annabelle standing beside him, ready to face whatever came next. "Gentlemen," Jonah said, his voice steady, "I believe I have some information that will be of great interest to you." The next few hours were a blur of questions, statements, and document handovers. Jonah provided the FBI with the USB drive, explaining everything he knew about the wider conspiracy. Annabelle stood by his side, filling in details and providing support. As news of the FBI's presence spread through the office, speculation ran wild. Employees gathered in the lobby, watching as agents carried out boxes of documents. The media frenzy outside reached fever pitch. Late into the night, as the FBI finally wrapped up their initial investigation, Jonah and Annabelle found themselves alone in his office once more. The weight of the day's events hung heavy in the air. "What happens now?" Annabelle asked, her voice small and tired. Jonah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Now we wait and we prepare. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Annabelle. Are you sure you're ready for what's coming?" Annabelle reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I'm scared, Jonah. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, but I'm also proud. Proud of what we've done, of the stand we've taken. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Jonah squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of affection for this remarkable woman who had become like a daughter to him. "Together," he agreed. As they prepared to leave, Jonah's phone buzzed with a text from their nanny. "Gordon's asking for you both. Says he can't sleep until he knows his superheroes are home safe." Despite the gravity of their situation, Jonah felt a smile tug at his lips. "Come on," he said to Annabelle. "Let's go home to our boy." The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in thought about the tumultuous day and the uncertain future ahead. As they pulled into the driveway, Jonah noticed a car he didn't recognize parked across the street. A chill ran down his spine. "Annabelle," he said quietly, When we get inside, take Gordon and go to the safe room. Don't come out until I tell you it's okay." Annabelle's eyes widened in understanding, but she nodded, her jaw set with determination. They entered the house casually, Annabelle immediately scooping up a sleepy Gordon and heading to the hidden safe room Jonah had installed months ago. Jonah moved through the house, turning on lights, making it appear as though everything was normal. Just as he reached the kitchen, he heard a floorboard creak behind him. Jonah spun around to find himself face to face with a man he didn't recognize, a gun pointed squarely at his chest. "Mr. Wilson," the man said, his voice cold and emotionless. "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you. The USB drive. Where is it?" Jonah's mind raced. The drive was safely in FBI custody, but this man didn't know that. He had to play for time. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jonah said, forcing his voice to remain calm. The man's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb, Wilson. We know Jack gave it to you. The contents of that drive could destroy a lot of powerful people. Hand it over, and maybe you and your family get to walk away from this." Jonah's thoughts flashed to Annabelle and Gordon, hidden away in the safe room, to Kayla and the sacrifice she had made all those years ago, to the future he wanted to build, a future free from the kind of corruption and greed that this man represented. In that moment, Jonah made a decision. He would not back down. He would not give in to threats. He would stand firm, just as Kayla had done. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Jonah said, his voice growing stronger. "That drive and all the information on it is now in the hands of the FBI. It's over. Whatever you and your associates were trying to hide, it's going to come out." The man's face contorted with rage. He took a step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you've done? The lives you've destroyed?" Jonah stood his ground. "The only lives being destroyed are the ones built on lies and corruption. It's time for the truth to come out." Just as the man was about to respond, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. The man's eyes widened in panic. "This isn't over, Wilson," he snarled, before turning and fleeing through the back door. Moments later, the house was swarming with FBI agents. Jonah learned that they had been monitoring his house, suspecting that someone might make a move against him. The man who had threatened him was apprehended trying to escape through a neighbor's yard. As the chaos subsided and the house was secured, Jonah rushed to the safe room. Annabelle emerged with Gordon clinging tightly to her, his little face buried in her neck. "Is it over?" Annabelle asked, her voice shaky, but her eyes fierce with protective instinct. Jonah pulled them both into a tight embrace. "It's over," he assured them. "We're safe now." As the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, Jonah felt the full weight of what had transpired. They had taken a stand against a powerful, corrupt system. They had risked everything, their safety, their reputation, their future, for the sake of doing what was right. In the days and weeks that followed, the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. High-ranking executives from multiple corporations were arrested. Government officials resigned in disgrace. The environmental fraud that had been perpetrated for years was exposed, leading to sweeping reforms and renewed commitment to sustainable practices. Wilson Enterprises, under Jonah and Annabelle's leadership, emerged as a beacon of corporate responsibility. Their unwavering commitment to ethics in the face of extreme pressure earned them the respect of their peers and the trust of the public. One sunny afternoon, months after that harrowing night, Jonah sat in the backyard watching Gordon play. Annabelle joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. Jonah smiled, his eyes never leaving Gordon. "I was just thinking about Kayla, about how proud she would be of what we've accomplished, of the world we're building for Gordon." Annabelle reached out, squeezing his hand. "She would be proud, of all of us. We finished what she started, Jonah. We made a difference." As they sat there, watching Gordon's carefree play, Jonah felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road had been long and fraught with danger, but they had emerged stronger. They had honored Kayla's memory, protected her legacy, and in the process forged a family bond that went beyond blood. The future was bright, full of possibility, and whatever challenges lay ahead, Jonah knew they would face them together, as a family, united by love, courage, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The autumn sun cast a warm glow over the Boston Common as Jonah Wilson strolled hand in hand with his grandson, Gordon. The little boy, now 5 years old, chatted excitedly about his upcoming first day of kindergarten, his words tumbling out in a rush of enthusiasm that brought a smile to Jonah's face. "And Mommy says I can wear my superhero backpack, Grandpa. Do you think the other kids will like it?" Gordon asked, his big brown eyes looking up at Jonah with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Jonah chuckled, giving Gordon's hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm sure they will, buddy. And even if they don't, what matters is that you like it. Remember what we always say." Gordon's face scrunched up in concentration before brightening. "Be true to yourself." "That's right." Jonah nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "You're going to do great, Gordon. Just be yourself and everything will be fine." As they continued their walk, Jonah marveled at how much had changed in the 2 years since the dramatic events that had shaken the corporate world and transformed their lives. The exposure of the widespread corruption had led to sweeping reforms across industries, with Wilson Enterprises at the forefront of a new era of corporate responsibility. Jonah's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from Annabelle. "Meeting with the Ethical Investment Board running late. Can you pick up dinner? Love you both. Looks like it's just you and me for dinner tonight, champ," Jonah said to Gordon. "What do you say we get some pizza?" Gordon's whoop of joy was answer enough, and they changed course towards their favorite pizzeria. As they walked, Jonah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The months following the exposure of the corporate conspiracy had been challenging, to say the least. Wilson Enterprises had faced intense scrutiny, with every decision and transaction from the past decade put under a microscope. Jonah and Annabelle had spent countless hours in depositions, board meetings, and press conferences, fighting to keep the company afloat while simultaneously pushing for industry-wide reforms. There had been moments when Jonah had questioned whether it had all been worth it. Moments when the stress and pressure seemed overwhelming, when the personal attacks in the media cut deep. But then he would look at Gordon, or catch Annabelle's determined gaze across a courtroom, and he would remember why they had taken this stand. As they entered the pizzeria, the owner, Tony, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Wilson, Gordon, the usual?" Jonah nodded, smiling. "You know us too well, Tony." While they waited for their order, Gordon tugged on Jonah's sleeve. "Grandpa, can you tell me the story again? About Grandma Kayla and how you and Mommy became superheroes?" Jonah's heart clenched at the request. They had decided early on to be honest with Gordon about their family history, albeit in terms a child could understand. The superhero narrative had been Annabelle's idea, a way to explain their fight against corruption in a way that wouldn't frighten Gordon. "Well," Jonah began, settling into a chair and pulling Gordon onto his lap, "it all started a long time ago, when your Grandma Kayla discovered some bad people doing bad things." As Jonah recounted their story, carefully omitting the more frightening details, he watched Gordon's face. The little boy listened with rapt attention, his eyes wide with wonder. It struck Jonah how different Gordon's childhood was from Annabelle's, how much love and security surrounded him. It was a testament to how far they had come, to the family they had built from the ashes of secrets and loss. Their pizza arrived, momentarily distracting Gordon from the story. As they ate, Jonah's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. Wilson Enterprises named Most Ethical Company for second year running. A warm sense of pride filled Jonah. The recognition was nice, but what truly mattered was the change they had managed to effect. In the wake of the scandal, Wilson Enterprises had completely restructured its operations, placing ethics and sustainability at the core of every decision. Under Annabelle's guidance, they had implemented industry-leading whistleblower protections, transparent reporting practices, and a commitment to environmental stewardship that went far beyond mere compliance. The transition hadn't been easy. They had lost contracts, faced skepticism from investors, and weathered more than a few storms. But slowly, steadily they had rebuilt, and in doing so, they had set a new standard for corporate America. As they finished their meal and headed home, Gordon's energy began to flag. By the time they reached the house, the little boy was yawning widely, his earlier excitement about school giving way to sleepiness. Jonah carried Gordon inside, the house quiet and warm in the evening light. As he tucked his grandson into bed, Gordon mumbled sleepily, "Grandpa, do you think I'll be a superhero like you and Mommy someday?" Jonah felt his throat tighten with emotion. He smoothed Gordon's hair back from his forehead, placing a gentle kiss there. "You already are a superhero, buddy." Every time you're kind, every time you tell the truth even when it's hard, every time you stand up for what's right, that's being a superhero." Gordon smiled drowsily, his eyes drifting shut. "Love you, Grandpa," he murmured before sleep claimed him. "Love you too, kiddo," Jonah whispered, carefully extracting himself from the room. Downstairs, Jonah poured himself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the back porch. The evening was mild, the air fragrant with the scent of late-blooming flowers. As he sipped his wine, he heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of Annabelle's familiar footsteps. "Out here," he called softly. Annabelle joined him on the porch, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Long day?" Jonah asked, handing her his glass of wine. She took a grateful sip before answering. "Long, but good. The Ethical Investment Board is on board with our new initiative. We're going to be able to fund sustainable startups in developing countries, Jonah. It's going to make a real difference." Jonah smiled, pulling her into a one-armed hug. "I'm proud of you, Annabelle. You've taken this company further than I ever could have." Annabelle leaned into the embrace, her voice soft when she spoke. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jonah. Without the foundation you built, without your support, none of this would have been possible." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to twinkle overhead. "I saw the news alert," Annabelle said eventually. "Most ethical company again. Mom would be proud, wouldn't she?" Jonah nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She would, of both of us." As they headed back inside, Annabelle paused in the doorway. "Oh, I almost forgot. A letter came for you today. No return address, but the handwriting looked familiar." Jonah felt a flicker of unease. After everything they'd been through, unexpected correspondence still had the power to set him on edge. "Where is it?" "On your desk," Annabelle replied, stifling a yawn. "I'm going to head up to bed. Don't stay up too late, okay? We've got that meeting with Gordon's teacher tomorrow morning." Jonah nodded absently, his mind already on the mysterious letter. He made his way to his study, flicking on the lamp and settling into his chair. The envelope sat innocuously on the polished wood of his desk, his name written in a flowing script that tugged at his memory. With a deep breath, Jonah opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As he read the first line, his heart seemed to stop. "My dearest Jonah, if you're reading this, then everything has finally come to light. I'm so sorry for the secrets I kept from you, for the burden I placed on your shoulders and on our daughters." Jonah's hands shook as he realized what he was holding. This was Kayla's letter, the one she had written before her death, the one that had been lost in the chaos of the adoption agency's closure. Somehow, after all this time, it had found its way to him. As he read on, tears blurred his vision. Kayla's words painted a picture of a woman torn between her past and her future, between her desire to protect those she loved and her need to fight against injustice. She spoke of her love for Jonah, her ache for the daughter she had given up, and her hope that someday, somehow, they would find each other. And if you're reading this, Jonah, it means that hope has been realized. It means you found Annabelle, that you've uncovered the truth I couldn't bring myself to tell you. I pray that you can forgive me, that you can understand why I made the choices I did. Know that you were the love of my life, Jonah, that the years we spent together were the happiest of my life, and know that in Annabelle you have a second chance at the family we always dreamed of. Take care of each other, love each other, and always, always fight for what's right. All my love forever and always, Kayla. Jonah sat back in his chair, the letter clutched to his chest, tears streaming down his face. After all this time, after everything they'd been through, Kayla's words were a balm to his soul, a final piece clicking into place. He thought about waking Annabelle, about sharing this newfound connection to her mother, but something held him back. This letter, these words, they felt like a gift, not just to him, but to their family. A gift that deserved to be shared in the light of day, when they could all appreciate its significance together. As Jonah carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had come so far, overcome so much, and now, with Kayla's blessing from beyond, it felt like they were truly ready to embrace their future. The next morning dawned bright and clear, full of promise. Jonah woke early, the events of the previous night still swirling in his mind. He made his way downstairs, the house quiet in the early morning light. In the kitchen, he found Annabelle already up, nursing a cup of coffee and poring over some documents. She looked up as he entered, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Morning, Dad," she said, the term of endearment still new enough to send a thrill through Jonah's heart. "You're up early." "Nervous about the meeting with Gordon's teacher?" Jonah chuckled, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Not at all. I think we both know Gordon's going to do just fine in school. Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about." Annabelle's brow furrowed in concern. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Jonah reassured her quickly. "Better than fine, actually. That letter that came yesterday, it was from your mother." Annabelle's eyes widened in shock. "What? But how?" Jonah pulled out the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he handed it to Annabelle. "It's the letter she wrote before she died, the one we thought was lost. Somehow, it found its way to us." As Annabelle read the letter, tears welling up in her eyes, Jonah watched her carefully. He saw the emotions play across her face: shock, sadness, joy, and finally, a deep sense of peace. When she finished, Annabelle looked up at Jonah, her eyes shining. "She knew," she whispered. "Somehow she knew we'd find each other, that we'd finish what she started." Jonah nodded, pulling Annabelle into a tight embrace. "She did, and she was right. We did find each other, and we did make a difference." They stood like that for a long moment, united in their love for Kayla and for each other. The sound of little feet padding down the stairs broke the silence. "Mommy, Grandpa," Gordon's sleepy voice called out. Annabelle wiped her eyes, composing herself before turning to greet her son. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you ready for your big day?" As they went about their morning routine, getting Gordon ready for his first day of school, Jonah felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was what Kayla had wanted for them, a family united and strong, facing the future together. The drive to Gordon's school was filled with excited chatter from the back seat, Gordon's nervousness about his first day mixing with enthusiasm for all the new experiences ahead. As they pulled up to the school, Jonah couldn't help but reflect on how different this moment was from his own childhood, from Annabelle's early years. Gordon was surrounded by love, secure in the knowledge that he was supported and cherished. After dropping Gordon off, Jonah and Annabelle headed to the Wilson Enterprises offices. As they walked through the lobby, employees greeted them warmly. The atmosphere in the building had changed dramatically over the past 2 years. Gone was the cutthroat competitiveness of the past, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and pride in their work. In the elevator, Annabelle turned to Jonah, her expression serious. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about," she said. "I've been thinking it might be time for me to take on more responsibility in the company." Jonah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to expand our ethical initiatives globally," Annabelle explained, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "We've made such progress here, but there's so much more we could be doing. I've been researching potential partnerships in developing countries, ways we could support sustainable businesses and ethical practices on a global scale." Jonah felt a surge of pride. "I think that's a fantastic idea, Annabelle. Why don't you put together a proposal and we can present it to the board next week?" Annabelle beamed, clearly excited about the prospect. As they exited the elevator and made their way to their respective offices, Jonah marveled at how far they had come. From strangers bound by a painful secret to partners in both family and business, their journey had been extraordinary. The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By late afternoon, Jonah found himself in his office, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called out. To his surprise, it was Jack, the mysterious informant who had first revealed Kayla's past to him. Jonah hadn't seen or heard from Jack in months, not since the dust had settled on the corporate scandal. "Jack," Jonah said, rising to greet the older man. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" Jack looked nervous, his eyes darting around the office as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Jonah, I'm sorry to drop in unannounced like this, but there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Jonah felt a chill run down his spine. After everything they'd been through, what more could there possibly be? "What is it, Jack? What's going on?" Jack took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a faded photograph, handing it to Jonah with a look of trepidation. Jonah looked down at the photo and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. It was a picture of a much younger Kayla, her arm around a man Jonah had never seen before. But it wasn't the man that caught his attention. It was the young boy standing in front of them, grinning at the camera, a boy who looked eerily like Gordon. "Jonah," Jack said, his voice heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. "There's something you need to know about Kayla's past, about your family. It's time you learned the whole truth." As Jack began to speak, Jonah felt his carefully reconstructed world begin to shift once again. The story that unfolded was one of sacrifice, of hidden identities, and of a conspiracy that went far deeper than anything they had uncovered so far. With each revelation, Jonah realized that the journey they had thought was ending was, in fact, only just beginning. The true test of their family, of their integrity, and of their commitment to justice lay ahead. And as the sun set over Boston, casting long shadows across the city they had fought so hard to protect, Jonah Wilson prepared himself for one last battle, a battle that would redefine everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and the true meaning of legacy. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in Jonah's office, when Jack revealed the truth that would once again reshape their lives. The sun rose over Boston, its warm light spilling across the city skyline, illuminating a world that had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Jonah Wilson, now in his mid-60s, stood at the window of his penthouse apartment, a cup of coffee warming his hands. His hair had gone completely silver, but his eyes still held the same determination and vitality that had seen him through the challenges of the past decade. Behind him, the sounds of a family preparing for the day filled the air. Annabelle's voice carried from the kitchen, gently urging Gordon to finish his breakfast. The boy, now 10 years old, had grown into a thoughtful and compassionate child with an innate sense of justice that made Jonah's heart swell with pride. But it was the newest addition to their family that brought a smile to Jonah's face as he turned from the window. 5-year-old Kayla, named after the grandmother she would never meet, came bounding into the room, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "Grandpa," she exclaimed, launching herself into his arms. "Is today the day? Do we get to see the new building?" Jonah chuckled, lifting her easily. "That's right, sweetheart. Today's the big day. Are you excited?" Kayla nodded enthusiastically. "Will there be a ribbon to cut? Can I help?" "Of course you can," Jonah assured her, carrying her towards the kitchen. "You and Gordon both." As they entered the kitchen, Annabelle looked up from where she was packing lunches, her smile widening at the sight of them. At 43, she had grown into her role as CEO of Wilson Enterprises with grace and determination. The past 5 years had seen her expand the company's ethical initiatives globally, transforming Wilson Enterprises into a beacon of corporate responsibility and sustainable practices. "There's my girl," Annabelle said, reaching out to smooth Kayla's wild curls. "Did you brush your teeth?" Kayla nodded solemnly. "Yes, Mommy, can we go now? I want to see the building." Gordon looked up from his cereal, rolling his eyes good-naturedly at his sister's enthusiasm. "It's just a building, Kayla. We've seen it 100 times already." "But it's not just any building," Jonah interjected, setting Kayla down and ruffling Gordon's hair. "It's a symbol of everything we've worked for, everything we believe in." And it was true. The new Wilson Enterprises headquarters, set to be officially opened that day, was more than just a corporate office. It was a testament to their journey, a physical manifestation of the changes they had fought so hard to implement. The building itself was a marvel of sustainable architecture, powered entirely by renewable energy and designed to have a net positive impact on the environment. But more than that, it housed the Kayla Wilson Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting whistleblowers and promoting corporate transparency worldwide. As they made their way to the car, Jonah couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The revelations Jack had shared that day 5 years ago had been shocking, to say the least. The truth about Kayla's past, about the depth of the conspiracy she had uncovered, had threatened to unravel everything they had built. But instead of tearing them apart, it had ultimately brought them closer together. The discovery that Annabelle had a half-brother, the boy in the photograph, now a man with a family of his own, had expanded their family in ways they never could have imagined. And the realization that the fight Kayla had started was far from over had given them renewed purpose. The drive to the new headquarters was filled with excited chatter from the back seat, Kayla peppering them with questions about the opening ceremony, while Gordon pretended to be too cool to care, though Jonah could see the anticipation in his grandson's eyes. As they pulled up to the building, a crowd had already gathered. Employees, media, and members of the public alike had come to witness the opening of what many were calling the most ethical corporate headquarters in the world. Jonah helped Kayla out of the car, holding her hand as they made their way through the crowd. Annabelle walked ahead, Gordon by her side, greeting people with warm smiles and firm handshakes. The confidence and poise with which she carried herself made Jonah's chest swell with pride. As they took their places for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Jonah found his mind drifting back to where it all began, to a rainy day in Boston, when a chance encounter with a young woman and her baby had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. He thought of Kayla, his Kayla, and the sacrifices she had made. He thought of the secrets that had threatened to tear them apart, and the truth that had ultimately brought them together. He thought of second chances, of redemption, and of the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Annabelle's voice brought him back to the present as she began her speech. "Today, we're not just opening a building," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "We're opening a new chapter in the story of Wilson Enterprises, a chapter that honors the past while looking firmly towards the future." As Annabelle spoke of their commitment to ethics, to sustainability, and to making a positive impact on the world, Jonah felt a familiar presence beside him. He turned, half expecting to see Kayla standing there. Instead, he found himself looking into the eyes of Jack. The older man had aged considerably in the past 5 years, the weight of the secrets he had carried for so long etched deeply into his face. But there was a peace in his expression that Jonah had never seen before. "You did it, Jonah," Jack said softly, nodding towards Annabelle and the children. "You finished what Kayla started. You built the future she dreamed of." Jonah smiled, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder. "We did it," he corrected gently. "All of us, together." As Annabelle concluded her speech and invited Gordon and Kayla forward to help cut the ribbon, a hush fell over the crowd. Jonah watched as his grandchildren, hand in hand, approached the giant red ribbon stretched across the building's entrance. In that moment, as the sun broke through the clouds and bathed the scene in golden light, Jonah felt a sense of completion wash over him. The journey had been long, filled with unexpected twists and turns, moments of darkness and moments of profound joy. But standing here, watching the future unfold before him, he knew that every step had been worth it. The sound of scissors slicing through ribbon broke the silence, followed by thunderous applause. As confetti rained down and cheers filled the air, Jonah felt a gentle breeze brush against his cheek. For a brief moment, he could have sworn he heard Kayla's laugh on the wind, felt the touch of her hand in his. "We did it, my love," he whispered, his words carried away by the breeze. "We made a difference." As the crowd began to move into the building, Annabelle made her way back to Jonah's side, slipping her hand into his. "Ready to see the future, Dad?" she asked, her eyes shining with emotion. Jonah squeezed her hand, looking from her to Gordon and Kayla, who were excitedly pulling Jack towards the entrance. He thought of the family they had built, of the legacy they were creating, and of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. "You know what, sweetheart?" he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I think I already am." With that, Jonah Wilson stepped forward into the bright sunlight, ready to embrace whatever new adventures awaited. The story that had begun on a rainy Boston street corner had come full circle, but in many ways he realized it was only just beginning. For in the end, the greatest legacy we can leave is not in buildings or businesses, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. And by that measure, Jonah knew their story would live on for generations to come. Hey, what did you think of this story? Leave a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and give your comment a heart. Keep diving into inspiring and exciting stories that can illuminate your journey and provide valuable insights. I'm sure the next video that appears on your screen will touch you too, so click it now and see you there.